Today's story will focus on the epic battle between Pope Pius V and the Ottoman Empire, a classic confrontation that changed the course of the Mediterranean. Before we begin, a quick reminder that we're on a journey to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support is a huge motivation for me to keep bringing you the best historical stories. Now let's dive into this dramatic historical tale. The 16th century, a period of intense upheaval on the world map. When empires rose and fell, global trade began to connect continents, and faith became a weapon sharper than any sword. The Ottoman Empire, which was merely a small state in the Anatolia region a few centuries earlier, had now become one of the most powerful empires in the world. From the legendary capital Istanbul, they gradually expanded, swallowing up the Balkans, capturing Constantinople in 1453, an event that shook Europe, and then pushing deeper into the Balkan Peninsula, North Africa, and the Mediterranean. See, the Ottoman domination over the Mediterranean was not simply a matter of territory. It directly threatened the survival of the Christian nations surrounding the Mediterranean, especially wealthy trading cities like Venice and Genoa. The relentless expansion of the Ottomans made Spain, rising under King Philip II, fear losing its influence and wealth from overseas colonies. In the decades leading up to the Battle of Lepanto, tensions escalated daily. Small skirmishes at sea occurred continuously, merchant ships were raided, and coastal cities were threatened. The peak of this tension was the siege and conquest of Cyprus by the Ottomans in 1570. Cyprus was an important Venetian colony strategically located at the eastern entrance of the Mediterranean. The city of Famagusta, the last fortress to resist, endured a brutal siege lasting an entire year. When Ottoman forces finally breached the city, they not only slaughtered thousands but also beheaded the Venetian commander, an act that horrified all of Europe. This was the final straw that Pope Pius V could no longer ignore. He called upon all Christian nations, Spain, Venice, Genoa, the Knights of Malta, and the small kingdoms of Italy, to unite in a common alliance to halt the Ottoman advance. The Holy League was born with a sacred mission to protect the faith and Europe from the spread of Islam. Despite numerous political conflicts and competing interests, the members understood that in the face of a common enemy, they must stand united. The overall command of the alliance was given to Don Juan of Austria, a young, talented leader with limited battlefield experience. However, his courage and steadfast faith earned him absolute trust. Alongside him were seasoned generals from various countries who had fought in many bloody wars across Europe and Africa. On the opposing side, the Ottoman Empire was equally serious in its preparations. Admiral Ali Pasha, who had won many naval battles before, commanded the entire fleet. With over 230 warships and tens of thousands of sailors and soldiers, the Ottomans were confident they would reaffirm their naval supremacy in the Mediterranean. The atmosphere was as tense as a drawn bowstring. Both sides understood that the upcoming battle was not just a military clash, but a contest of strategy and spirit, a struggle for power, faith, and the future of an entire strategic sea region. The world held its breath as the outcome of Lepanto would shape Europe's fate for centuries to come. Both fleets began to deploy in the narrow waters of the Gulf of Lepanto. But behind those imposing lines of ships lay the story of two cultures, two beliefs, and two irreconcilable wills. The Christians, Alliance was a coalition of diverse nations and forces, yet shared the same sacred goal: to stop the Ottoman advance. At its core was the Spanish fleet, with sturdy ships and well-trained sailors. Interspersed were smaller Venetian warships, the self-sacrificing Knights of Malta, and the determined soldiers of Italy, the Papal States, and Genoa. However, not everyone fully trusted this cooperation. Political conflicts and power struggles forced the alliance to coordinate cautiously. Nevertheless, under Don Juan's command, fighting spirit and determination were ignited, like a torch lighting the way for all of Europe. The Christian fleet was divided into three wings: the left commanded by Venice, the right by Spain, and the centre, the main force, directly led by Don Juan. Don Juan's flagship was one of the largest, equipped with cannons and artillery, ready for the decisive battle. In contrast, the Ottoman fleet was not only a symbol of military might, but also embodied the grand expansion of an empire. With over 230 warships, each a floating fortress on the sea, carrying tens of thousands of sailors, mercenaries, archers, and slaves rowing under extremely harsh conditions. At the centre was the massive flagship of Admiral Ali Pasha, armed with powerful artillery weighing several tons. Ali Pasha, famed for multiple naval victories, was known for his cold, meticulous, and decisive nature. He had absolute faith in his fleet's strength and the loyalty of his sailors. The Ottoman fleet was also divided into three wings, similar to their opponents, led by experienced commanders, many of whom were devout Muslim warriors committed to expanding the empire and protecting their faith. A special contrast was seen in their organization and tactics. The Christian fleet often relied on large ships with strong defenses and superior firepower, coordinated with agile, smaller vessels. Meanwhile, the Ottomans relied heavily on the quantity and speed of smaller warships, working together with infantry, archers, and marines to board enemy ships in close combat. The difference was also evident in fighting spirit. For the Christians, this was a holy war defending the faith against foreign powers. Prayers, dedication, and unwavering faith drove soldiers to fight with utmost resolve. Conversely, the Ottoman fleet, disciplined like steel, fierce with imperial resolve and territorial ambitions, and confident in Allah's protection, was equally fierce. On every ship were everyday stories mixed with heroism. Young sailors going to battle for the first time, seasoned warriors who had seen many campaigns, and soldiers recruited from across the empire, all stood at a decisive moment. Amid the choking smoke and salty sea air, each man carried fear, hope, and a personal ideal. Who would emerge victorious from this battle? Who would become legend? And who would be forgotten in the bloody pages of history? As the drums sounded, sails filled with wind, and thousands of swords were drawn, the Battle of Lepanto began, a fight not only of weapons and armies, but of spirit and will, a turning point in the history of the Mediterranean Sea. As the sun rose high, its brilliant light gleamed off the white sails of the two massive fleets. The air seemed to pause for a moment. Everything was silent before the storm. Then drums began to beat, trumpets sounded from the command ships, and the battle commenced. The Christian Alliance fleet, with over 200 warships armed with cannons, artillery, and long-range weapons, stood ready to face the Ottoman Empire's formation of more than 230 warships. Under Don Juan's command, they focused on leveraging their firepower advantage and tight coordination among their wings. As the ships drew near, a hailstorm of cannonballs and artillery fire erupted, shattering the calm over the sea. Explosions roared, gunpowder filled the air, and thick, black smoke enveloped everything. Wooden ships were shattered, hulls exploded, and torn sails fluttered wildly in the wind. At the front, the Ottoman smaller warships tried to close in on the larger. Alliance vessels for close combat, where swords and spears would decide the outcome. The slave rowers were pushed into a life-or-death struggle, rowing with all their might, surging forward like living waves to maintain the attack's momentum. The clashes were intense and relentless. On deck, Christian and Ottoman soldiers pushed, fought, and killed in the cramped space. Shouts, the clash of metal, and the ringing of swords and spears echoed like a deadly symphony of war. Don Juan, sword shining in hand, led the central force, relentlessly urging his troops on. His image became a symbol of resilience and determination, inspiring fighting spirit in everyone. Admiral Ali Pasha was no less formidable. He appeared in the thick of battle, directing waves of attack and boosting sailor morale. With precision and bravery, he deployed tactics to break the alliance's formation, trying to exploit their numerical superiority and the speed of his smaller ships. One of the most dramatic moments came when the Ottomans used fire ships, small vessels loaded with flammable materials, to attack the alliance's larger ships. Fierce fires erupted on the sea, black smoke columns rising fiercely. But the alliance sailors, well prepared, skillfully avoided or extinguished them in time. As time passed, the battle's intensity increased minute by minute. The wounded fell, the dead sank, blood stained the water red, mixing with the salty sea. It was a fight for survival, merciless, leaving no room for weakness. After hours of combat, the alliance's attacks gradually gained the upper hand. The large ships with superior firepower weakened the Ottoman formation. The fighting spirit of the Ottoman troops was severely tested as their ships were sunk or captured. At the climax of the battle, Ali Pasha was severely wounded in fierce fighting on deck. He was forced to retreat, leaving the fleet in chaos and disarray. This was the crucial turning point that decided the battle's outcome. As night fell, shouts still echoed over the sea. The Christian alliance achieved a resounding victory, but at a great cost. Thousands fell, and dozens of warships were destroyed or captured. The Battle of Lepanto ended like an earthquake, forever changing the Mediterranean's balance of power. It was not only a military victory, but also a symbol of Europe's strength, willpower, and unyielding faith in the face of the Ottoman Empire's threat. And so today's story ends here. Thank you for watching the entire video. See you in the next video.